All right, everybody, welcome to our Level Up live webinar. Oh, sorry, geez. Welcome to our live webinar here with Lance Gill. If you're just joining us, I want to make sure that you're aware that you can for sure ask questions. So there is a Q&A box. Please go ahead and type away. Doesn't matter when you do it, because then we're going to have the opportunity to answer questions maybe throughout, or I'll push it towards the end of our talk today to make sure that we don't get too far off track. So we did have a lot more people register than are here right now. So I'm sure a lot more people will come in. But for those of you that are here today, right in this moment, I wanted to say a big thanks to Lance Gill for showing up and sharing some of his wisdom. So thanks for joining, Lance.
Thank you, guys. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. So for those that don't know Lance, I want to give you an opportunity to maybe just share a little bit about your day-to-day, and then we can work backwards and jump around. But what does a typical day in the world for you look like? And I know you do a lot of things, so you can pick any day you want.
Okay. Well, for instance, today, I had an LPGA player come in and was having some lower back pain due to an accident. She underwent, and our job was to understand if her swing and her body were fighting each other or if they were happily joined. And we found a lot of variability in her body's ability to do what she wanted to do in her golf swing. So the question is, what do we do from this point? And this LPGA player lives in Jupiter, Florida, and I'm all the way out here in San Diego. So I'm currently in the middle of understanding how to deliver her coaching methodologies for her and her fitness coach to collaborate with what we saw here in San Diego and be able to apply these techniques where she lives in her hometown. So this is a really good microcosm of my world, where my athletes are on the go. They're everywhere. They're all over the planet, from Asia to the Middle East to America, and having an ability to deliver information, get feedback, get questions, and continually coach the athlete, I think, is where I see a lot of people going in this modern era. Everybody's not in your local market, if you will. And why would you want them all to be in your local market? Because you're centralizing your opportunities to 6 square miles. And to me, that's silly. And today is just a good example of how it works on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's actually a perfect example, right? Because when people are tuning into this, a lot of times when they think of remote training or remote coaching, they think, well, that's exclusively remote with that particular person, not necessarily a blended approach. And so in this example, you did an in-person assessment, gathered some information, and you're going to maintain the relationship and charge accordingly for the remote aspect. And we're going to dive into the collaboration aspect too, because I think everybody that's on this call really needs to understand the collaborative part.
Yep.
But there may be 2 times or 3 times a year you see this particular person in person, and the rest of the time you're coaching them remote, right?
Yeah, but the reality is, I mean, I could have done 85% of what I did in person on remote if I wanted to, but some people like that impersonal touch. So I'm a big fan of having the options available for the client when they want or what they want.
Right. And
the reality is, if you look at all the athletes in the world, they're still programmed to think that 1 hour session is what you need, hands-on,
right,
in a gym or in a clinic. But I think with modern day technology, we're being able to branch out from that, and selling the athlete, selling the coaching staff for the blended approach is where we're at right now. And sometimes it's hard, but I'm seeing more buy-in from athletes as we progress deeper and deeper to each year.
Right. And you have the opportunity to maintain this persistency in the relationship that maybe wasn't possible, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. So maybe walk us through the evolution of how you landed on this model. And I know you still deliver in-person experiences and things like that, but maybe walk us through how you landed on the model and what kind of kicked you over the edge.
Well, I mean, the reality is not many tour players live in Southern California. And I'll start with them because of a lot of reasons. But, you know, in order to extend the coaching, we had to come up with creative techniques to be able to answer questions, to deliver programming, to be able to answer the coach's questions if it's a golf coach that wanted to ask a question. So we were piecemealing everything on emails and text messages and some golf analysis platforms. And there really wasn't anything to tie it all together, if you will, until probably 5 or 6 years ago when we started talking, and we really got into the Edify, which changed into the CoachNow platform. And now we're able to put everybody on the same platform, be able to discuss the different aspects and interject when we need to, whether it be a parent interjecting, a coach, or the athlete themselves, from wherever you are, from the simplicity of your smartphone, your iPad, your computer, what have you. And like you said, it extends the coaching. And to me, that's more touches per client. Every time you touch a client as a coach, you're hopefully doing something positive versus we're going to see you for one session for 60 minutes and that's it. And I just feel like even though it's a 5-minute interaction between me and the client, it goes farther than sometimes a 60-minute session does in person.
I'm really glad that you said that, because I think a lot of people that think about remote coaching have a difficult time, and we're going to touch on this, everybody, about the expectations, right? Because when you are selling this to somebody, you want to set some really solid expectations so you're not over-promising and under-delivering.
100%.
But for you, Lance, I think a lot of people listening to this might go, oh man, they're just going to be blowing up my phone all day, every day, and I'm not, there's no way that I can charge enough to warrant this. I think what you just said, though, is there's these micro interactions that have this kind of longer lasting kind of rippling effect. So maybe kind of speak to your experience with those kind of touch points along the way.
Well, part of how I base my business is if I reach out to a client and give them 3 to 4 minutes of my time, just, hey, Lance, can you look at this video and tell me if there's any improvement over last week's pelvic tilt? I look at the video, I draw lines, I voice it over. The total time to buy in for me takes literally a minute to 2 minutes. The client opens it up, reads it, watches it, gets the feedback, goes and practices, and that whole time frame could be 5 to 10 minutes. So
right,
I'm getting anywhere from a 200% buyback to 2,000% investment on a return on investment, if you will, for every touch point. In 2 minutes of my time, yielding 10 minutes on their time, that's good coaching, because they're bite-sized nuggets, they're digestible, and they can keep coming. And from the athlete's perspective, you're no further away than your phone to talk to your coach versus having to drive across town in traffic, so on and so forth. I think that it adds another dimension to training. So I should say coaching, not just training.
Sure.
That the athlete really buys into, because it's on their time now. It's not just on my schedule.
Yeah. And I think that asynchronous aspect of it is really, really important. I know that's largely why I created the platform once upon a time, because it was so difficult to get on the phone with someone like you, right? Because you're busy and our schedules don't match, or we're in different parts of the world. So we're never going to be able to sync up in a way that makes a lot of sense. But now, because you can communicate using video that you just put there and someone can play it later, or an audio note or a PDF or whatever, it does allow the stakeholders, and in most cases to the athlete, right? But all the stakeholders to kind of buy or absorb the content as they go, rather than everybody having to be, on the same timetable.
One thing that it just struck me as odd today when I'm working with this LPGA player, she's out here for a very condensed period of time. We have to get a lot of information covered, a lot of techniques covered, both physically, technically, and even practice-wise. Her caddies, and I see it in the player's eyes, like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I say, I wish I could just bite this down, just pare it down to simple things that we can do. And we don't have to rebuild Rome in one night. But every time I try to add another block to the building of the city, I want it to be understood and progressed on. So I don't want any regression. And I find that the remote coaching model allows us to add some of those easier, tangible tasks to be executed.
I like that, right? It gives you a little bit of space to digest, test it out, give some feedback, rather than in a half a day session, right? There's so much information. And the reality is that even though you want to just have her do 1 to 2 things for that 5 hours or together, that's not what they want, right? No. They want a fire hose, but at the same time, that's not productive for them. No. So I totally buy into what you're saying as far as the remote side of things. You have an opportunity to kind of drip it out, right? Have a little bit different cadence to it.
Yep. And I find that the people that buy into that they're getting amazing results. And in many cases, I guess I've crossed a bridge that I never thought I would cross, which is, hey, Lance, I've achieved all my goals. I'm doing great. Everything that I set out to do is great. Right. So I don't need to be on the system anymore. I'm like, whoa, that's not what I expected. But that's a cool problem to have, because if you allow the athlete to progress at their pace versus you have to do it in the time that we're touching each other, I think you're seeing some big time results with the athletes. And now I got to figure out how to cross that bridge. If I've accomplished all my goals, what do I do now?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting, right? Because they're going to say that they may leave for a month or two, but because they have this persistent connection to your content, right, and to their progress, if and when they want something else, you're obviously the first one they're going to call.
Hopefully.
Versus looking for somebody else. I believe that's my experience in seeing so many people doing this.
Absolutely.
And I think a good example of this too is my fiance is a psychologist. And when people come to her, she says, well, I usually work with people for 12 sessions. That's typically when we transition to something else, right? So she has this kind of finite piece of time. She's like, I don't want you to be solely dependent on me for your entire life. That's not the type of therapy I want to deliver to you. Mm-hmm. So I think we as coaches have to be okay with the transitional side, and it might not be, a spoon-fed relationship for 20 years. And that's okay, because it's our job to give the athlete the tools to be autonomous, not necessarily be dependent, right?
Yeah. P and Lynn used to talk about that. We're trying to create independent athletes versus dependent. And, it's just the dichotomy of you're trying to build a business and you love the action, you love the financial side of it, and the athlete's doing so good. It's something you have to understand. There's going to be an ebb and take. There's going to be a give, or, an ebb and flow, if you will, to this.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay, because they will come back when they need more information on their time.
Yeah. And the likelihood is, though, they're going to refer you one or two other people along the way, right? So if you're doing your job, they're happy, they're going to tell other people. And I think in the CoachNow world, which has been positive that I've seen, is that this athlete has at least a long history, 3 to 6 months of something that they can show their friends and say, well, look, this is all the stuff I did, and this is how Lance does his thing.
100%.
So let's dive into the marketing side of this. So just bear with me, everybody. I'm going to kick off a screen share here, and it might just take me a moment to find the right thing that I want to share. So, okay. All right. So is everybody seeing Lance's website here? Is that what everybody's seeing? And I'm just going to share it a little bit differently. I don't want to share the whole thing. There we go. All right. So hopefully we're just seeing the website here. So Lance, this is really cool because this is actually different from the last time I looked at this a couple of weeks ago. So you've made some evolutions here.
Yep.
As far as how you're doing things. So walk us through how you're marketing it, and then we're going to jump into the pricing and talk about how you came up with what you did. So walk me through kind of the decisions to pare this down, because it's a lot simpler or a lot more streamlined than last time I looked at this.
Yeah.
So maybe just kind of walk us through your thoughts here on your marketing page and what you're hoping for.
So basically what we're trying to, I want the athlete to understand that getting help isn't a complex, in-depth, eternal process. It's basically a 3-step process. You get with your fitness coach to review the goals, the plans, what you want to accomplish. And I think that's the most important thing is I want all the athletes out to understand that I'm here to help you attain your goals. I may think you should hit it farther, but your goal may be, I want to play a full round of golf without any pain. So I need to understand and listen to what your goals are, and then help you understand the feasibility or the achievability of those goals in a set period of time.
Yep.
Once we understand where your goals are, then we have to go to step 2, which is understanding what your body can or cannot do, because they directly interact with one another. So our purpose is to understand physically what you can do, so that we can then pair it up to what you currently are doing in the sport that you're choosing. We're just really good at golf, but we work with all athletes of all types, because human movement is human movement.
Yep.
And then based on those results, we have to understand if there's a roadblock or a hurdle from your body that's impeding your ability to achieve your goals, it's going to be our job to program to overcome that. And that would be step 3. Receive your personalized plan based on what your goals and assessments are showing us. And then the hard work begins. That's when you have to start doing the exercises, doing the drills, giving us feedback, sending us videos. Here's me doing my step through drill. Is this right? When we can tell you yes or no and give you feedback. And then basically it kicks you back to step 1 at a period of time, such as a 1-month interval, a 2-week interval, to reassess where your goals are and where your body is. So it kind of kicks back to step 1 and 2 and understand, here's where you made the progress. We need a little bit more work on this, and continually adapt your programming based on your adaptations of your body.
Yep. Yep. And can you walk us through step 1, how you go about doing that if you're never going to see this person in person? Is this a phone call? Is it a Skype call like this? What are you doing?
Traditionally, what we have is if somebody contacts us via the website or a recommendation from another client, what we'll do is we'll set up a phone conversation or Zoom at the client's comfort level, and we'll take them through the entire history. So tell us how you heard about us. Tell us why you want to get help. What are we here for today?
Yep.
Pain reduction. Is it hitting it farther? Is it playing longer? What have you? And then get an understanding a little bit about the athlete's gym IQ and golf IQ, which is their understanding of how to be in a gym, act on fitness, or on the golf course. What's your handicap? What other sports have you played? So I want to know the proficiency of an athlete that we're dealing with. And it doesn't matter if you're a high-level athlete or a low-level athlete. I just want to know where we are, get to know a little bit about you so that we can make the client comfortable. Basically step 1 is free. There's no charge to it. Some people go to step 1 and like, man, you know what? I don't know if this is right for me. Or, oh, wow, I didn't even think it was this in depth. So this is our place to interact with the potential clients in a very easy way to see if they're interested in going forward.
And how long does that usually last? Is that 15 minutes, an hour? What do you do?
Man, I tell you what, to Shauna and Kaylee, my providers that work with me, they're oftentimes going through this step 1. And I've heard from 5 minutes, people, I get it. I love it. You don't have to sell me. I've already been sold by your client. Or it could be an hour's worth of conversations and questions. So I try to say on average about 10 to 15 minutes. So. Got
it. Okay. And then, because I think that's pretty common, especially in like remote mental health. I know like a 15-minute consultation is very, very standard. You get to know them, you share what you do, your strategies, and hopefully it's a good fit. So now let's look at step 2. I obviously use CoachNow for a good chunk of step 3, I think more so. Well, but what are you using what are you doing in step 2? I know you use us and maybe something else too.
So we use the Zoom platform that we're all on right now to video conference the physical assessment. And it's a lot easier than I had originally thought it would be, or people would tell me. So I simply, here's an example of Kaylee demonstrating a radial deviation screen to see if you have the ability to set the golf club. The client watches her perform it and then sets the phone or tablet up to repeat it. And while she's doing that, we'll actually screen record your movement. Because at the end of step 2, when we're done with this physical evaluation, we're going to take all those recordings, download them to CoachNow, and we'll voice them over. So you're going to get a video feedback saying, here's your radial deviation screen. The reason why it's hard for you to do what your coach is asking you to, because you don't have the ability to hinge your wrist, whereas you're using your elbows. So we'll draw lines and educate the client how their body is interacting with the technique that they're trying to use. So it's a seamless environment where we're using that Zoom platform as well as CoachNow to deliver all those pieces of data to our client.
That's awesome. And I think that's a real nugget for anybody that's on this right now, because I always am encouraging people to record their interactions like this, right? Because a lot of people will do the remote training, but it kind of escaped me for whatever reason, right? To screen record somebody moving within that frame and then upload it and do some more work to it. So I think that's an awesome note for anybody that is I should say, most all of our coaches are movement specialists or kind of technical people that use our platform. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Yeah, that's awesome. So I think it's coming across pretty dang clear. It's a simple system that you've initiated here. So let's talk about the pricing and how you've come across this and maybe some evolutions in pricing, because pricing is not the easiest thing to land on first off without necessarily having some sort of elasticity to it. So maybe walk us through your 2 top packages here. The custom one we can talk about too, but maybe walk us through the packages that you're offering.
Well, what I've looked at, and I'll base this off of a concept that I've been mulling around my head for years. If you take 1,000 people who are interested in fitness and love golf, so we'll say they're golf fitness enthusiasts, 1,000 people, and you look at their training habits, about 10% of that population, or 100 of those people, will be all one-on-one. They want the highest level of training. They're going to train with a trainer 3 times a week, and they have the expendable income to go after it. Now, those are oftentimes what we want as clients. Those are the big spenders, the ones that will commit, the low-hanging fruit, if you will.
Sure.
But then there's the bottom 30%, and I call it the DIY, the do-it-yourselfers, who want to get everything they can get, and they're going to get it from the internet, YouTube, Golf Digest, what have you, Men's Health, and they're going to do everything on their own. That's a population that's great. I'm fine with it, but it's not something I want to waste a lot of my time on because they want to do it all yourself. I'd rather focus on that 60%, that 600 in the middle that want structured guidance, want a team with them, but not in their face every single second. So I came up with a program that will offer you upwards of 60 minutes of actual one-on-one time with a personalized coach, and then those continuous interactions throughout the month that could attribute or contribute to another hour's worth of time.
Yep.
Overall from our side. And if you extrapolate that out, if every 5-minute interaction on a coaching platform yields another 15, and we're contacting people 15 times a month, you do the math, it adds up very quickly.
Got it.
So your perceived value for that $200, it goes way up. Now, some of my athletes like to have a program. They like to work on it for a month, give us feedback, and then every month we just kind of change and reassess and reevaluate. So we offer them that foundational package. But some people just love to have the continual change of the program. They want to keep up to date with it. These are traditionally higher level players that really want to stay on top of things. And that's just the same program, but it's twice a month. We evaluate and have a goal setting session. If not, hey, check out some of these training, 2 60-minute online coaching sessions, and then the reassessment. So it's at the player's discretion what they want to invest, and I want to make sure I have offerings to suit all of their needs. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And so if I'm here, I'm getting a sense of this, I'm like, hey, this makes sense, right? I'm going to hit inquire. It's going to bring me to this contact field. And then you're going to reach out to them and set up that step 1 on the assessment.
100%.
Right? That intro
so the first part will be, we'd love to chat with you, see if this program is the right fit for you, to learn a little bit more about your body, why you're coming to see us or want to see us, and go from there. And again, we'll custom. We can text this out, we can email, we can phone call, Skype, doesn't matter. We'll do it and make sure it's in your wheelhouse of comfort.
Beautiful. And then as far as collecting payment, because this is a fairly common question, you and I have been doing this a long time, so it's a fairly simple answer usually for us. But for those that don't necessarily do this, how are you collecting your payments? What software are you using?
Traditionally, PayPal is what we've used. I've had Venmo. I've had people send in hard checks. I'm pretty easy. I even have a credit card. I'm not huge on that, but all those work. I try to make it easy for the clients so that at the end of the month, we are handling it the way that is easiest for them.
Yep. And I would encourage anybody that's listening to this, if you're selling something that has a minimal requirement like Lance has, have an auto renewal aspect to whatever you're selling. You don't want to have to then hit them up and collect another $200 check, let's say, because that's not necessarily in anybody's best interest, but mostly yours as a coach.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like there's a lot of software platforms out there. It's where you can get inundated. You can go up to a level of very uncomfortable for smaller operations, and having that auto pay feature would be ideal to help out.
Yeah, because anybody that's in the service business like we are, like I remember running junior camps and always having to chase the parents down for $10, right? Because I didn't have a system that just kind of auto billed them for the $10. And it just makes everybody feel uncomfortable, right? So you want to make this as streamlined and as frictionless as possible. So look at PayPal, look at Stripe, look at Square. If you're using some sort of scheduling software, it might already have it in there. So like USchedule or MindBody or all the other ones that offer some sort of scheduling and billing component probably has some sort of recurring payment aspect to it. So just be mindful of that if you're listening to this, and it'll make your life a lot easier.
Another thing to be mindful of, Spencer, is the processing fees that sometimes we face. And
that's also true. Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my processing fees below 3%. I mean, I would love to see below 2.5%. So you think about it, if you're taking 3% off of a $200 a month, that's $6 that's coming off. I think I'm doing that right. That's a lot. It adds up quick, but I want you to pay attention because it's not just 200 you get. So whatever pricing you go with, make sure to reflect the those processing fees in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of us as business owners, and I'm assuming most of us that are on this call are sole proprietors or a part of an academy or something, right? You do always have to consider your overhead. So website hosting, the processing fees, like you're saying, if you have a Zoom premium account, you're going to do that. Obviously, if you're a CoachNow member, you've got that. So I only say that to say that that's just a cost of doing business. So don't freak out about it. Don't pinch all the pennies and sacrifice dollars, but be aware of your pricing so that you're pricing accordingly. That's really all it is, right? Just understand, just like in a restaurant, you got to understand your food costs. Otherwise you're going to lose money on every burger you sell, right? So you just got to make sure you're doing that right. So let's look at let's talk about marketing. So I'm going to highlight Lance's Instagram here for a second. I know Lance does a lot of different things out there, but as you'll see, he's got a great social following here. He's got a good amount of followers. He's talking about what he's doing. It's not in great detail, but obviously Instagram doesn't provide that. I know this link right now is linking to one of your events, but typically would this link be going back to your website for the remote training?
Traditionally that goes right back to remote training. But for this week, we're hosting that event. So that's our pathway.
So is there any advice you can give to anybody listening to this that would I mean, you've been at this a long time and you're very dedicated. So persistency is part of why this number at 28K is there. But what kind of things are you passionate about sharing socially that kind of helps you stand out, do you think?
Well, I've taken a segmented, compartmentalized approach. And by no means was I really good at this. I would just post random stuff up, hope it's stuck, and there was no form to it. Now we're going to, you can see some quotes there from higher level athletes that tend to deal with performance. So I'm trying to get along to the people that, you know what, the best athletes in the world dedicated themselves to X, Y, and Z, so that you can see that it's not just me randomly coming up with this. I also try to include a little humor. There's a little kid playing miniature golf. Tiger Woods just set the new world record for miniature golf. Some common current events, and then educational posts. You'll see videos scattered in there, like one out of every 5. So I'm trying to mix up education, humor, current events, testimonials from higher level people, and just a glimpse into a little bit of what we do, where I am in the world. Because now that way you just don't inundate the Instagram or social media with exercises or swing drills, because that gets really old. So I'm trying to create different vantage points, keep it fresh, and just let people see, you know what, this is real life stuff. Anybody can do it. It doesn't matter if you're the highest level or the lowest level. And then you'll see little pictures of like the video screen with Kaylee. I'm trying to deliver the marketing message that, guess what, we can do this remotely. So it's not just somebody working out in a gym, which is Kaylee right next to it. This can be done remotely. So subtle reminders that's why I'm here personally.
Right. And I think as we scroll all the way down to where I was and kind of work our way back up, I think everybody looking at this, right, you're going to notice that more recently there's been kind of these softer sells on the training program, right? The remote training protocol aspect, in addition to everything else. But I think it's also very clear who you are, what you're doing, what you're offering, what your interest is. I don't think it's muddied at all. And I think that's a challenge as coaches, is kind of trying to find your lane.
Now, what you're also going to see here is a very concerted, my color scheme is purple. Everybody can see it. You may or may not like it, but I'm working with a marketing agency that off the get-go, this is MEV Marketing. They're based out of Miami. I was made aware of them a long time ago, and they said, well, you have zero branding. People don't know who you are. And you'll see Wilma Rudolph's has a purple outline. Everything goes back to the LGP color scheme, so that no matter where you are, you can tie this in. And I would say that if I'm going to give an example of where I was really bad, that was it. And the MEV team has really helped me organize and compartmentalize my thoughts, my releases. So I would release 4 pieces in one day, and then it would be dormant for 10 days. So
right.
There's a consistent message going out. People can come to expect what it is, and it ties back into something as simple as color scheme, which is a brand issue. And I think all the people on this call can understand that, hey, we're not the best at branding ourselves, and we can do better. And these are examples of how we've stepped up our game a little bit.
I think that's a really cool point that you just made, right? Because it's very clear, again, everywhere, this little slight tint. And if you are following CoachNow, you would see this orange is in a lot of places, right? We have our color palette too. We only use a certain amount of colors. That's part of brand recognition.
Yep.
You create rules around how your logo appears. And for anybody listening, as you're building your marketing pages and you want to reference CoachNow as the software you use, because a lot of people like to do that, to say like, this is the software I use. You can hit us up and we can give you a media kit. You can actually just go to coachnow.io, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see a button called design. And you can download a media kit there. You can look at how we do it. And we're going to be revamping it too, because I think it's important to understand that as a company, we're always trying to improve our branding, our messaging, not only just the technology, but everything that goes around it. So you're always learning. You're always trying to get better. And
Spencer, there's a couple questions that just popped up. You want me to
Yeah. So I want to answer these questions, and then we're going to jump into actually showing what's inside of one of Lance's spaces, because then you can actually see what he delivers.
Perfect.
So let's get these questions going. I'll tee them up for you, Lance. We talked about pricing, but I think we maybe didn't go deep enough into it for this particular question. So did you work it out in relation to your previous hourly rate? Did you kind of do the math off of that, or how'd you come up with it?
Well, I would love to, but basically what I did, I've structured my entire business, the remote side of my business, to, and this is for everyone running a business out there. And I structured it so that Kaylee, who's a provider, Sean is a provider, they're going to be doing a majority or bulk of the assessments and the calls and the follow-up communication. I'm the golf guy. If there's golf questions, they bring me in. Shauna and Kaylee are the performance experts. If I look at their total time on task, I call it. So if Kaylee's invested an hour and 15 minutes into a client, her rate of pay would be X, the business would be taking X, and X would be going to marketing for platform expenses. And when I came up with what I want to make per client per hour and divide it all the way up, the 200 was right in that wheelhouse.
Okay.
And I wanted to charge something that wasn't, astronomical, but wasn't in the $40 to $70 range, which I see a lot of online coaching platforms going into, which is fine. But I also noticed that in those coaching models, there isn't a lot of interactivity with the client. It's all automated. We don't want to be totally automated. I'm looking for that 50-50 split so that the client feels like there's a lot of hands-on touch. And then there's that automated online aspect. So there's where the $200 comes up with. It's somewhat close to my hourly rate, but again, it's not dead just on that hourly rate.
Yeah. And I think some important things to kind of add into that would be when you're building out that pricing, Lance, I'll just kind of recap it, right? Lance is talking about all the sunk costs that go into that. He's got staff, which is really great. But it's really important just to understand the value that you're delivering, because it's not, as I talked about in the webinar we did a couple weeks ago, there's a difference between remote coaching, as we call it, or remote training, like you're calling it, Lance, and online lessons. Right? An online lesson is a pure one-time exchange, in my opinion, $50 for an analysis, and then that's it. So you don't want to price yourself so low that you have to do these one-time interactions. You want to sell the program as Lance is doing right from the very beginning. The
Correct.
Assessment is part of the program. It's not the first interaction, and you have to sell them on a bunch of other stuff later.
No, and the reality is, you might, if my practitioners are investing an hour and a half of their time initially, and I pay them an X per hour, all right, that is a higher rate of outgo for my business versus if they are with the client for 2, 3, 8, 12, 15 months, and the client's demand on the practitioner goes from an hour and a half to 45 minutes a month, because simply they're more efficient and they have a better relationship and they don't need as much hand holding. Well, now from a business perspective, the hourly rate that my business takes in is much higher. So listen, on the initial outset, I'm very understanding that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of investment into the client, but you'll see that ease back a little bit as the client becomes more comfortable. Not that we're shortchanging the client, but they just get it quicker and are able to be more efficient. That's really what I'm trying to get home is like, you don't need to be sitting there with me for an hour and a half in a gym. You could do this in 15 minutes if we do it the right way.
Right. And I think what you're likely going to land on too, Lance, and anybody that's on this call, is over time, you're going to do 100, 200, 300 assessments, let's say. You might find ways to automate some parts of that. So a really lame example would be, hey, fill out this survey, right? And now that's something that they get right away. They fill it out. And when you get on the call, you're maybe not having to ask all the same questions because you have a little bit of a heads up on what they're looking for.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Even from your guys' perspective, you always tell me, hey, Lance, tell me what can make your process easier. And if I Zoom record 25 videos and you offer a batch download process
Exactly
via
right.
platform, which is in the works, that saves me 10 minutes of time. And that may seem silly or mundane, but if you multiply that by 400 evaluations a year, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. Yeah. And I think one of the other things for those of you that are looking kind of at the CoachNow side of this, and we'll jump into that in just a second, we do have a feature called templates. And those are really cool ways to onboard a prospective client, right? Because you can get their email address, you can send them into a space, and even if they don't end up buying, you can at least have a survey in there that they can fill out. Like you can link to a SurveyMonkey thing. You could have a welcome video. Hey, what's your goals? Throw in a swing, whatever, right? There's a lot of opportunities, I think, to not only have more of the high touch consultation like Lance is doing, but also automate some of the onboarding aspect if you want to. So we've got another question here, which I think is really great. For the unlimited communication, what would be the average number of submissions in a week, month you would expect for the athlete to be happy? And along with that, have you found the ability to increase compliance initiative from the athlete's perspective? So it's a two-parter, and we get this question all the time. One being, what's the level of communication that's expected, or at least that you're selling, right? And then two, how the heck do you build in compliance and accountability? Because a lot of coaches are like, well, my people are paying me, but they're not necessarily interacting, right? So maybe you can kind of touch on both of those things.
Well, this goes two ways. So this is an interesting. So Tyler, this is a really good question, and thank you for asking. My business side, I ask my entire staff, and that includes me, we would want to have at least one touch point with a client every 48 hours. So what that says is every 2 days, we want to have interaction with a client. And you may not see it all in CoachNow because sometimes the clients really love text.
Yep.
You'll see a lot of the interactions here from this page that you're scrolling through.
Yep.
One of my clients, Jorge, is sending us notes of how his round went, how his workout went. There's Kaylee sending a workout for different days, and then there's replies in there. So as long as I have a touch point from my team every 48 hours, that's at least 15 touch points a month. Think of them as little training sessions. And I mentioned this before, but I'll go over it again. If I give 2 minutes of my time to respond or give a post, that could have a 10 to 15 minute carryover effect on the athlete. And if you multiply that by 15 of those a month, that's a massive time under, we'll say, coaching, time under coaching. And that to me is where you're going to get a good success rate. Gosh, I would love to do it every 24 hours, and maybe I'll get there, but at least every 48 hours, so that I can make sure the client knows, hey, we're paying attention. We're not just dogging you for $200. We want you to give response. Therein lies the flip side. If I'm complying with you every 48 hours, guess what? I'm expecting you to do the same to me. Because if you are showing me that you're answering, even as saying, hey, Lance, doing great. Thanks for the update. That's fine. So that goes into the second part of the question, is increase the compliance.
Yeah.
I demand that the clients respond to me, because if they don't, it tells me that they're either not engaged in the program, they're not buying into it, and we have to do a little bit more digging at that point as to what's going on. Maybe they're busy. Maybe, I was on the road for 10 days. I'm sorry, I was in Africa or something. I don't know. But I like to have that 48 hours, but I demand it on the other side as well.
Yep, absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about the leverage opportunities, Lance. And this is not a loaded question because I honestly don't know if you're doing it. So I think it's just important to even ask you. Are you using the feature here? Now, hopefully you can see my mouse, at least hovering it, the segments feature at all?
Not as well as I want to, because I'm so busy doing all this other stuff. I need to learn more about it. So
let's talk about this one real quick. So I'm not going to click into it out of just, sake of just Lance not using it that much. But what I want to encourage you guys to do is check this feature out. You can access it mobilely as well as on the website. We're going to be renaming it soon to be called Smart Lists and kind of rebranding it. But I think a great example of this feature is a guy by the name of Martin Chuck. And if you're in the world of golf or you watch Golf Channel, you'll know his name. He's got about 4,000 athletes inside of our system. And he uses this feature called segments to group them together. So an example for Lance would be he could have a segment called remote training clients. He could have a segment called tour players. He could have a segment called in-person. And so for anybody that is on the remote training side of things, Lance can send one message to say, how's practice going? And that would actually go out to every single person that's in that segment. They would have no idea that you sent that message to anybody else. And it gives you a ton of leverage as a professional to manage a pretty sizable list of clients. And that's why we built it. It's been there a long time, but I think it's a very underutilized feature, which is why we're going to rename it, kind of push it up into the front, make sure everybody's aware of it. Because for those that take advantage of it, it really helps save a ton of time.
Click on it for a second.
Okay.
I do use it. I'm not an expert. So you're going to see two categories here: RTP clients, remote training protocol, TPI experiences. Those are on-site experiences.
There we go.
So
perfect.
What I'm doing is I'm boxing, and this is really cool. You just made me think about this. From a marketing standpoint or from a management standpoint, I like to see where my segments are. So the TPI experiences are people that come to see me. And of course, I want to change some of those over to RTP, long-term clients, but I can see where I have each one of those groups. And then I can ultimately drop different styles of messages into them in a group setting. So I think it's a good feature. I just don't know if I use it as well as I should.
Yeah, I would encourage you to think about it as not necessarily replacing fully, but I know Martin uses this and a lot of other coaches use this as their replacement of MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever email service you might be using.
Yep.
Martin does this. He'll record a video because you can do that in CoachNow. He can blast it out to 2,000 people's spaces, their golf spaces in this case. It could be any sport, obviously. And it's like, hey, Tour Striker Nation, I've got a golf school coming up. If any of you would like to join in, let me know. And he sells out every golf school, and he only has to send one message, right? He's not doing it via email because he can't see the videos there. And the nice thing is, because he uses CoachNow in all of his golf schools and his remote training, because he's got remote coaching too, all these messages land in somebody's space. So it's all just this very organized, streamlined history of all of their interactions.
Correct.
So I would encourage you, if you haven't dug into segments, do it. We've got help videos around it, but honestly, it's so easy. You create a segment, throw some spaces in it. The main thing that you need to know is one space can be in multiple segments. It's just very easy to have it in the same place if you want it to be. A good example would be, here's a junior, but they're also a remote training person, right? And they're in both segments. It's very simple to organize that way.
Right.
And then when you're in it, you can manage the segment, and then you would post. And on the mobile app, there's 3 little dots in the right-hand corner on the bottom of the screen if you're using iOS. And from there, you can access it. On the iPad and Android, it's a little different. You just go into the menu and you find it. But we're actually going to be bumping that up to the front screen because we're going to be restructuring a few things, because this is such a powerful feature that I don't think is getting used enough because it's kind of hidden. So we've got some great questions here. We've got about 15 minutes left, so keep the questions coming. I'm going to jump back into Jorge's space just in case we want to look for anything else. So here's a question. So being a busy trainer with a full question, how do you find the best ways to fit in the online evals and consultations, as well as all the other things that you're doing? So I think it's about managing your time and your business is the main question here that we want to figure out.
Yeah, Joey, that's a good one, because the reality is the reality is I haven't been able to switch over to 100% online, if you will. For instance, Kaylee's probably working 40 to 50% of her time on-site clients at TBI, at houses. And then the other 50 to 60% is online evaluations. So we basically create a schedule that she's available for each day. And if she's going to be off-site working with a client, she's going to book out the appropriate time. And then the remainder of those times will be available for those online scheduled appointments. Now, I can tell you that a majority of our online evaluations come early in the morning or during mid-afternoon or later in the evening. So the flexibility has to be there if you're going to go online to suit the client's needs. Because if I got people on the East Coast, which is 3 hours different from me, and they want to do a 7 p.m. or a 5 p.m. when they're done with work, that's actually 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. for me. So I have to adjust. And then when they're in Southeast Asia, they're doing a nighttime, and I'm up at 4 a.m. doing that type of stuff. So yeah, we kind of have to work with the client and go with the flow in that regard.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think one of the ways to leverage being a busy person is hiring more people, right? That's where we all hope to be, is that you can build a team. If you're at a point where you're overwhelmed, strongly consider finding a way to replicate you, right? Build some redundancy in your business so that it's not all on your shoulders.
And that's why I hired the girls, because I'm in an airplane, I'm teaching seminars, I'm all over the planet. And the reality is it's hard for me to build a schedule that it can be financially viable for me, because I don't make money when I'm on an airplane. And if Kaylee's available to be there to do it, and all I have to do is jump in, sign in, and monitor and chime in when needed, it creates a different structure that is easier for my lifestyle. It's easier for their lifestyle. And let's think of it from the clients. And every one of my clients have access to Shauna, Kaylee, myself, and Justin, my business manager. So they got 4 experts right on them. And if any questions come up, well, we're all there to help out. So there's 4 sets of eyes looking at the same problem. So that's another example of over delivering.
Absolutely. Right. And all the coaches that I know that have reached a certain level of success, right, they've built a team around them, whether it's a business manager, consultant, marketing person, or supplementary trainers that go along with them. We've got a great question here. I think it's more of a technical question, which is nice. So it's, how do you embed exercise videos into the chat history of CoachNow? I think what we're seeing here is this. So I'm going to give you one example here. Just click into here, go to media, and then you can either upload something from your computer. You can grab something from your CoachNow library, and you'll see if I click on this, it populates these different things. If you're on your phone, it's the same mechanism, and you can always add different types of media as replies. So not only can you post at the high level like this of text, and if we go all the way to the top, right, you can write a little note here, you can post some media there, but our platform is different than a lot in the sense that you can reply with any type of media that you like as well. And we have this library feature, which we're going to continue to improve. It works well if you know how to work it, but we're going to keep improving it so it's a little more simple for anybody to navigate. But you can even upload a bunch of stuff into your library to reuse. And the nice thing is, I think for Lance is that, or for Kaylee in particular, she's probably done this foam rolling example a number of times. So it lives in her library, and she's going to be able to reuse it time and time again.
Yeah, and I believe they tag all their exercises in the library so that
yes,
it becomes easier for them to find them, if you will.
Yep, and you'll notice these tags right here. And that's why for those that use tags, the library works great. There's a lot of folks that aren't using tags as well as they could, so it becomes difficult to organize the content. But some very future-oriented library improvements will make it simpler, and it'll also give you the ability to share some content in a different way. Can't put a timeline on that. If I did, I would be fully lying to you, but we're really excited about improving the platform, and we're always working hard in the background to do that. Sadly, not every improvement is something that everybody sees, because a lot of it's like technical foundational stuff that makes the experience better, but it doesn't necessarily make it cooler for you. And this session will definitely be recorded. That's the last question we have here. Yeah, it's a lot of information. I don't expect you to gather all of it right now or digest it right now. For a lot of you, you may remember that CoachNow, one of our foundational elements, is built on the forgetting curve. We know you forget more than you remember, and there's a lot of science to back that up. So we're definitely record this for you. So we've got 10 more minutes. This gives you an opportunity to ask any question you like. You've got Lance and I here. I can be more of maybe the technical person. Lance has got all the business know-how that you might want to be learning from. Great. So here's a kind of a very standard business question, which I think kind of touches on the challenges a lot of coaches face, would be, how do you handle in-person clients that haven't paid for remote coaching that keep reaching out remotely for help? So I'll let you answer that one, Lance, and then I've also got a best practices one across the entire platform, but how do you do it?
Laura, I think that's a really good question because it happens all the time. So what I've done recently, and my TPI experiences are half-day experiences. So they're all on-site, in-person clients. They pay X dollars to be there with me and my staff for 3 hours. I include the remote coaching into the price of my session. So, well, I'll tell you, at Titleist, if you're going to come and see me for 3 hours, it's $1,200. So part of that is you're going to get Kaylee for those 3 hours, Lance for those 3 hours. We're going to build your program. We're going to put it all onto CoachNow, and you get a month of service for free included into that.
Yeah.
But it's not free. It's all part of the entire structure of the package. So I don't give them the opportunity to opt out, is what I'm saying. This is now a part of how I do business. Even if it's on site, you're going to have all of your drills, your homework followed up with on X. And I'm going to charge accordingly because I aim to get results out of my clients, and I aim for retention out of my clients and feedback from them. And I can't do it all in that 1 hour session or 3 hour session.
And that's the word I really want you all to pay attention to. And Lance, maybe you can speak a little bit more to it, would be the retention aspect of this, right? You're building in your model. Well, and this is why I created, CoachNow so long ago, was that exchanging time for money around lessons didn't work. I would always have to resell them to come back. So you're selling coaching programs. And as a part of that, you're doing everything you can to kind of sell this ongoing connection. And I used to do it via email and text and all these other terrible ways. And that's why I invented this dang thing so long ago. But let's talk about your retention numbers, Lance. You don't necessarily have to be specific on it because I know that's probably private to you. But let's just talk about, in whatever way you feel would be appropriate to share, the level of retention introducing this kind of communication and this level of programming, right? What it's done for your business.
I mean, in the last year, I've had 3 clients leave. That's it.
Yep.
And they weren't due to unhappiness. It was a junior who wasn't enjoying working out, and he was 12 years old and he wasn't ready for it. So, but he loved the whole thing. He just wasn't going to do it. And the parents didn't want to spend money. So I have had amazing success. We actually polled every single one of my clients at the end of September to say, how are things going? Please reach out. And it was an in-depth questionnaire by Justin. And literally every feedback was positive. There wasn't any negative feedback. And there was plenty of opportunity to provide negative feedback. And there just simply wasn't. So the retention levels are pretty good. Now, you'll get into problems if you get lazy and go 5 days without communicating and think that's okay, now I can keep doing that. Or if you're not demanding your clients continue with their feedback. And I think this delves into a point where, I'm not comfortable still, and I've been in this business 20 years, I'm not comfortable with firing a client if they're not adhering to the programming, because I don't like losing money. But the reality is, if somebody's not being retention, savvy, they're not communicating. I've had 2 juniors really in this bucket, and I've had to be very firm, saying, listen, if you don't step up the game, I'm going to have to say no to you, unfortunately, because it's going to end up reflecting negatively on my brand if I let it go. So I would say retention's been very good, because it's so easy for the clients to respond and on their time. It doesn't always have to be on my time.
Right. And I think that last part that you talked about with the juniors was what I was going to highlight a minute ago, is that if you're looking to get accountability or compliance, you have to set the expectation that this is how I work. This is what I do. So you need to do your part of it. And ultimately, while it might feel not great to fire someone, as Lance said, it will come back to bite you, because it will reflect negatively on your brand in the long run if you just let people kind of stay around and ultimately they're not getting any better because they're not participating. So then they're like, well, who's your coach? Well, Lance. And, you know, I've been playing terrible, right? You don't want that because they're not doing their part.
Correct.
But at the same time, that kind of energy is going to be kind of spread around in their friend group, and you don't want that.
Well, the other good part about step one of my process is this is where I weed out a lot of potential, you know, roadblocks for success for my business.
Yeah.
And I learned this from Dr. Thomas Bird, one of the world's leading hip orthopedic surgeons. He's like, I'm not the best because I'm the best. He goes, well, I'm good. He goes, but I think we're the best at screening our clients. I'm like, physically screening them? I'm sure. He goes, no. Choosing which clients are right for surgery. And if we choose which clients are right for our businesses or our remote programs, it's much better than trying to select everyone. Instead of chasing dollars, chase the clients that are going to give you success. And that requires you to ask some harder questions up front. And most of all, it requires you to say, at some point in time, you know what, this may not be the best program for you. Maybe you should try this person's program because I don't think you're going to be successful within the framework here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's imperative, right? You're building a relationship, so it needs to work both ways. So as we wrap up here, we've got a couple more questions. One being, clearly this works well in the golf world. I want to make it clear that Lance, while this is a golf example, we've talked a lot about golf, Lance is a movement specialist. He works with people from all different sports. So regardless of whether you are like the movement specialist in the truer sense of the word, in this physical fitness aspect of it, anybody that is doing anything technical, basketball, soccer, tennis, we've seen a lot of success in remote Olympic weightlifting coaching. There's a lot of people doing it, and all the advice that Lance has given us today parallels all of that, right? Onboarding, interviewing your clients, how you deliver what you're delivering, the level of attention, the business model. It's the same for everybody. So this advice goes across all the different verticals or different sports.
And I'll say from my experience, I recently got invited to work with the Chicago Blackhawks outside of my wheelhouse, I would say. And applying movement screening and coaching for the hockey players was as easy, if not easier, using the platform. And I was really well pleased that this can cross different sports in an instant. It's so simple.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's why we built it as open as we did, right? Coaching is coaching. There's nuanced aspects of it. And you might use some sort of statistical program or some sort of assessment platform that does like 3D assessments. Use all that. And hopefully some of that content ends up in CoachNow as a way to kind of tell that story. But we built it as open as we did because we wanted it to apply to as many sports as we could. So we have a technical question here. Gilbert, I would encourage you to email us that one because we're going to wrap up in just a minute. But it is very simple to go into the library and edit the tags. You can totally do it. I'm just not going to necessarily jump into that right as we close. But if you hit us up on this little support widget, you can even type it in and there'll be a video there that shows you how to do it. And if you can't track it down, hit us up and we'll walk you through it very easily. But every piece of content is editable and you can re-tag it as you use it. So we've got 2 minutes left. I don't think we have any more questions coming in, but I do want to give this last minute here for Lance to share anything else you want to, Lance. I think it's important for everybody to know if you are looking for somebody that is in the world of what Lance does and you're using CoachNow, it's a no-brainer to at least hit Lance up to kind of build a bridge with him because you may need to send somebody his way from a movement specialist kind of standpoint. But Lance, as we wrap up, is there any kind of last pieces of wisdom you want to share from this kind of this remote coaching world that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I would love to. I've recently been branching out into getting this platform, the remote coaching, onto other people's coaching platforms. So just for instance, like Coach Castor out of the East Coast, golf coach, has all of his clients that he's coaching using the system. And we formed a relationship where I would be his performance aspect of his business. So all of his winter program clients are now coming through Lance Gill Performance and getting evaluations, but we're putting all the information under Coach Castor's CoachNow platform so that from the client's perspective, all the information is funneled through one spot. Now, a client could have a golf space and a training space, a fitness space,
Yep.
And what I found is like, I can be the remote coaching arm for an entire academy. And I think that's a huge advantage, Because the reality is every coach out there doesn't have a fitness center or performance directors at their fingertips. So let me be that person for you. And those types of relationships can be struck up in any sport and any place on the planet, as long as we have a platform like CoachNow to help moderate it.
100%. Yeah. And I would encourage anybody that's listening, right, to understand that connect with someone like Lance, or literally Lance, via social media, strike up a relationship, shoot him an email, whatever way that you can connect with him, please do it. Because you might be the golf professional he refers people to if you're a golf coach. If you're somebody that's looking for a fitness professional, Lance could be that person. But I would encourage you to think about your network and understand that there's technology that can bridge the two of you together. So if you're following someone or friends with somebody on the East Coast that you could be complementary to, strike up a relationship, try to figure out a business model that can work for you. Because honestly, that's usually my go-to advice is tap into other professionals' Rolodexes, and you're never really going to have to do you're not going to have to do a ton of dedicated marketing on your own, because you're going to be sharing and collaborating.
Correct.
So with that, we've reached our time window. Lance, you the man. Thank you so much for being as open as you were. Thanks everybody for joining and asking such great questions. I will dish this out as a recording soon, as well as a way to get in touch with Lance if you want to. So until then, thanks again, and we'll catch you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.